All right, students, in this video, we're going to talk about what happens to food when you eat it, basically following the digestive system. So, as we can understand, whenever we eat food and goes in through our mouth, it goes down a long tube that leads eventually into our stomach, where, as you can see, there are a bunch of other organs that are down there. So these organs are made of tissue, and those tissues are made of cells. And the food works its way through our digestive system until it comes out the other end. And so the process that happens in between is the process of digestion. So there are two main types of digestion. Two types of digestion. The first type of digestion is called chemical. And the other type of digestion is called mechanical. So chemical digestion is the type of digestion that takes place using enzymes. And we will highlight a few of those. And the mechanical type of digestion is basically just breaking down food. So mechanical digestion is going to happen when food enters the mouth. Your teeth are going to chew up the food, it breaks down the food, and that is a type of mechanical digestion. Chemical digestion, whenever your food enters the mouth, there are a bunch of different glands, and you can see several around here, plus there's some more down in the stomach, that they're going to release enzymes that help break down the food. So those are the two types of digestion. Digestion begins with food entering the mouth. Once it enters the mouth, your teeth are going to chew it up, and your tongue is going to help push it to the back of your throat. The teeth chewing it up is the example of mechanical digestion. In the back of your mouth, right here, a very common name that we will use is called the saliva glands. So just think, whenever your mouth is moist and all that spit that you have in there comes from your saliva glands, and that helps break down the food. Primarily, this helps break down carbs. So a lot of the food we eat has carbohydrates in it. Think of all our breads and pastas and stuff like that. And the saliva helps break down the carbs. Once you begin to chew up your food, you have what is called a bolus. Bolus, B-O-L-U-S. And a bolus is basically a glob of food. So that glob of food begins to enter to the back of your throat, and it's pushed down into your throat into this part right here, which is called the esophagus. So the esophagus is this long tube. The food will be pushed into the esophagus, and that's just basically a long tube that leads to your stomach. And you'll also notice that there's an additional tube right here, kind of towards the front, and that part of the tube is called the trachea. Another name for the trachea is your windpipe. Of course, we'll talk more about that in respiration, but as far as digestion, we're only worried about the esophagus, which leads to the stomach. There is one more piece and it's kind of tough to see, but right here, and it's always what we think of when you look down a person's throat, and there looks like there's a covering that kind of covers between the two tubes. So between the esophagus, which goes to the stomach, and the trachea, which is in the front, there's a flap that can help block the trachea or the esophagus, so that no matter what we're eating or drinking or breathing at that time, it goes to the right area. and that is called the epiglottis. And so the epiglottis is right here. Okay, epiglottis. And the epiglottis, again, it covers the trachea. As food passes down the esophagus, it eventually reaches the opening into the stomach. And before it goes from the epiglottis into the stomach, it passes through this ring of muscle. And this ring of muscle helps keep things that are in the stomach, and things that are coming through the esophagus, it allows them to go into. But your stomach is full of acid, so you don't want that coming back up and out like when you vomit. You don't want that coming back up and out. So right here at the base of the esophagus is something called the esophageal sphincter. The esophageal sphincter, as I mentioned, is just a ring of muscle. It's a ring of muscle. And it opens and closes. A ring of muscle that opens and closes. Food then enters the stomach. The stomach is this big organ right here. It's kind of J-shaped. And once food enters the stomach, that's where the food is, it grinds it up and it churns it. So think of like a washing machine where it's churning the food and it's mixing it with HCl, which is hydrochloric acid. HCl, which is hydrochloric acid. It's also mixing it with something called pepsin. And pepsin is to help break down protein. Protein. I can't get that written on there, so it breaks down the protein. Now, you'll notice around the stomach, there are 3 additional organs. There's the liver, which is right here, the liver. You've got this little guy right here called the gallbladder. And you've got this one that sits back here. All right, and this is called the pancreas. Oh, and take that back. They actually have that labeled right there. Sorry. They have it labeled right there, the pancreas. So the liver is the largest organ in the body. All right. Or of the digestive system. I guess I should be more specific. The largest organ in the digestive system. And it is responsible for producing bile, which is another type of enzyme that helps break down food. And it also filters your blood. And so when we talked about homeostasis, we talked about alcoholism and how filtering out the alcohol through your body can be dangerous for the liver if you drink too much, because it filters all your blood. The gallbladder, which is right below the liver, so there's the gallbladder right below the liver, right there. The gallbladder is what's going to deliver the bile. So as the liver is making the bile, it goes into the gallbladder, which then squirts it into the stomach. The pancreas, which was right there, the pancreas is going to make insulin. So insulin helps break down sugar in the blood, and of course, this is what, when we have a lot of diabetics, this is something that they need. All right. So food is making its way down the esophagus into the stomach. It passes through the pyloric sphincter, At the same time, you have the liver and the gallbladder and the pancreas producing these enzymes that they squirt into the stomach. Everything is being churned up and grind up inside of the stomach. And then food from the stomach will pass through a very small opening. It is right here. It's called the duodenum. And the duodenum is section like right there. And that's the passage between the stomach and into the small intestine. Once food passes through the duodenum, it enters into this long chain of stuff, and this is our small intestine. We only have one, so don't say intestines, it's small intestine, singular. And this is where most of our digestion takes place. Most digestion happens. So most of our digestion is taking place in there. And inside the small intestine, there are all these little hair-like substances. They kind of look like little fingers, like that. And they are called villi, V-I-L-L-I. It's on your diagram. I think it's like shaded over here. It looks like something back and forth like that. So the villi are these little finger-like projections that they help suck out the nutrients out of the small intestine. So the food continues to work its way all through the small intestine, and eventually it will work its way over to the large intestine, which begins right here. And so food enters the large intestine, and it'll work its way around the stomach like that. The large intestine is also known as the colon. The large intestine is filled with a lot of bacteria. So the large intestine is filled with the bacteria, and its main thing is to absorb water. So it begins to take out all the water out of the food that we eat, which it compacts it and turns it into what we call feces. Of course, if you're taking out too much water, you become dehydrated. You're dehydrated, you're taking out too much water, and you become constipated. And if you have too much water in your system, the opposite happens. It's all runny and you would have diarrhea. So the food continues to work its way through the colon or the large intestine. It's sucking out all the water, and all the bacteria that is in there is helping continue to break down any nutrients that might be left. But by this time, like I mentioned, it's mainly feces. Of course, the bacteria that's inside your large intestine or colon is also what helps produce your odor when you have flatulence or you're farting. And that can be based on a lot of things, primarily based on your diet. And so mainly the worse that your diet is for you, the stinkier it is, but also sometimes stinkier farts also come along with the type of food you eat. It can come from eating things that are high in fiber, which is a lot of our vegetables, will sometimes give you more gas. There's a whole lot actually related to that, but a lot of that is taking place from inside of your large intestine. You eventually reach this final area right here, and that last area is known as the rectum. And where food actually leaves the body in the form of feces is through the anus. This little ring of opening right here at the bottom, again, it's a ring of opening, so it's a sphincter, and this is the anal sphincter. And that is what opens and closes for you to do your business. And now you know what happens to food when you eat it. So quick recap. So food enters our mouth where we chew it up. It's pushed to the back by our tongue. It goes down the esophagus. The epiglottis blocks the trachea. As it goes down the esophagus, it enters through the esophageal sphincter into the stomach, where it's churned and munched up with a bunch of acids and other enzymes coming from the liver, the gallbladder, and the pancreas. Food leaves the stomach into the small intestine through the duodenum. The small intestine is where the main part of digestion takes place through villi, which suck out nutrients. It then enters the colon or large intestine and works its way around where extra water is absorbed, and it exits the body through the rectum and the anal sphincter. And that is what happens to food when you eat it.